All right, let's journey back to one of the most chaotic and epic chapters in all of history, China's Three Kingdoms period. This was a time when legends weren't born, they were forged in fire and steel. Today, we're going to uncover the story of one of its most fascinating and maybe one of its most unlikely heroes.
So close your eyes for a second. When you picture a legendary warrior from ancient history, what do you see? I bet it's someone tall, right? Imposing, a real giant of a man. Well, get ready to have that image completely shattered. Here's the incredible paradox at the heart of our story. The man we're talking about, Yue Jin, was one of the most ferocious and respected generals of his era. But all the historical records agree on one thing. He was short. A man whose actual physical presence was the total opposite of his gigantic reputation on the battlefield. So, who was this guy who just completely defied every single expectation? Let's meet the man behind the legend.
This is what the history books tell us. Yue Jin wasn't born into some powerful family. He came from a humble background in a place called Yangping. And yep, the chronicles are very clear. He was short. But they're just as clear about what was going on inside. He was packed with, and I'm quoting here, extraordinary courage and a will so decisive it just screamed leader.
So you have to ask, how does a man like this even get a shot at greatness? Well, to understand the man, you got to understand the absolutely insane times he lived in. The Han Dynasty, this massive empire that had stood for centuries, was completely falling apart. The old rules where your family name was your destiny were being shattered. Warlords were carving up the country, and in this brutal new reality, who your dad was didn't matter nearly as much as how well you could fight. And it was right in the middle of all this chaos that Yue Jin made a fateful choice. He joined the army of the brilliant and ambitious warlord Cao Cao, a decision that would change everything.
Yue Jin didn't climb the ladder by shaking hands and playing politics. Nope, he earned his reputation right where it counted, on the bloody front lines, leading the charge.
His first real trial by fire came against one of the most terrifying warriors of the age, the legendary Lu Bu. See, Cao Cao's army was stuck outside the fortified city of Puyang, and it was turning into a brutal meat grinder of a siege.
And this right here, this is the moment that defines Yue Jin. While other soldiers were probably hesitating, staring up at those high walls with arrows raining down, he stepped up. He volunteered to lead the Vanguard. He was the first man up the scaling ladders, the first to leap onto the battlements crawling with enemy soldiers. I mean, can you even imagine the guts that takes? That single act of insane bravery lit a fire under the whole army.
And believe me, this wasn't a one-time thing. The main historical source from that period, the records of the Three Kingdoms, says it plain as day. This was his signature move. He built his entire career on being the first guy into the hornet's nest. His name basically became another word for first to charge.
His entire career was like a highlight reel of impossible situations. At the massive Battle of Guandu, he was the one leading these daring raids to burn the enemy's food and supplies. But trust me, his most legendary moment was still on the horizon.
Okay, so this is the battle that would turn him from a great general into an absolute legend. He and a couple of other commanders were given the job of defending the super important city of Hefei against a massive invasion from the southern warlord Sun Quan.
Just look at that number. Let it sink in. 7,000 defenders, 100,000 attackers. The odds weren't just long, they were a joke. But somehow, through a mix of brilliant strategy and just pure, unbelievable courage, Yue Jin and his comrades didn't just hold the city. They launched counterattacks that completely broke the spirit of the invading army and forced them to retreat. It was unthinkable. So, for a lifetime of this kind of service, for his relentless courage on the battlefield, Yue Jin was given one of the highest honors any general could ever dream of. He was named one of the Wuzi Lengjiang, which is pronounced kind of like Wuzi Liangjiang, and it means the 5 elite generals of Wei. Now, this wasn't just a fancy title. This was basically a formal declaration that he was in the pantheon. He stood shoulder to shoulder with the absolute greatest commanders of his entire generation. You know, after a whole career spent fighting on the front lines, it wasn't a spear or an arrow that finally took him down. It was an illness. In 1880, Yue Jin's incredible life came to a quiet end, but his story was just getting started.
This final summary from the official historical records, it just leaves no room for doubt. It tells you exactly how he was remembered. His entire identity is boiled down to 2 things:
always being the first one over the wall and being one of the best to ever do it.
So what's the big lesson here? What do we take away from the life of this short but absolutely brilliant general? What is his real legacy?
When you really break it down, his character shines through. The guy was fearless, a true leader who led from the absolute front. He was a fierce warrior, but also he was humble. He wasn't in it for the glory. And he was unshakably loyal. This was a man fighting for a cause, not for himself.
In the end, Yue Jin's whole life is just proof of a timeless truth. How tall you stand has nothing to do with greatness. Real strength, the kind that lasts, is measured by your courage, your actions, and your character.
I just have to end with this powerful take from a later historian. Short and brilliant, exceedingly brave, first to charge, without looking back. No one since ancient times can surpass this. Wow, what a tribute. It perfectly captures the essence of what made him so unique.
And that really brings us back to a big question, doesn't it? The story of Yue Jin kind of forces us to look in the mirror. In our own world, which is so often obsessed with image and how things look on the surface, are we actually measuring the right things? His legacy seems to scream that true greatness, the kind that actually changes the world and lasts for centuries, is built on something much, much deeper.